Okay, let's get started. So last week we started this. Was it last week we started, right? We started this last week, the tic-tac-toe. Yeah. So we basically did a bunch of things. And what I want to do is just go over the last class, and if there are any doubts, any concepts that you need clarified, we'll do that before we move on. Because we covered a lot of new things. We covered a bunch of things that are important. So this is what our roadmap we showed was. And we started in the first class, we did the first screen here, the Hello World type of app, then the calculator in the next two classes, and now we are doing this multi-activity app. So this is, I'm just going to move forward. These were the topics we said we are going to cover through this app that we are working with now, working with multiple activities. This we already did last week. You learned how to invoke another activity from one that is already existing. How to display lists or tables using Recycler View, and how to do that using an activity fragment. This is what we did also last week. Navigation, we did a part of it. The intents, you saw how to create an intent in order to launch a new activity. Passing information, also we just did an overview of how to do that. We haven't actually passed any information yet. And the other things we are going to cover as we go along. So this is what our basic layout was for the app. It will have a list of past games, which will allow us to start a new game or view a previously played game. And when you start a new game, when it finishes, it sends the data back so that the list adds that game, right? And then ultimately we'll add a splash screen, so the game will actually start at splash screen and move forward. So you did this part. How to display a list. List view used to be the previous standard for Android. Now they are promoting Recycler View because it has many advantages, as we looked at last time. And it is also a bit more complex. So we did that using activity fragments. And this is what basically we ended up with. So I changed the screen resolution. You should see that the fonts are a little bit bigger today than they were last time. Okay, so let's clear up the clutter and just focus on the code. So when we added the activity fragment, it did a bunch of things. We added it to this content main, the fragment. And the fragment itself contains of two things. One is what goes inside each item, and the list of all the items, which is basically a recycler view. So when we did that step where we said create a new activity fragment, like so, we did new fragment and we chose list. This was our thing. We added the list fragment like this, and that's what that step did. It added these two files, and it added a bunch of these list fragment and recycler view adapter, and also list data. And it had some funny names like dummy list, dummy data, and all that. We did a refactor to rename those. So let's just take a look at what all this is and how it is interacting with each other. So this is what we want to display. Maybe there is something here, some data, something like that. This is the recycler view. So And this itself, we put it in a fragment, and that fragment is in the activity. I won't go into the details of the fragment, but let's look at this. What all does this need? It needs some way to define what is in each item. So that is item data. That is basically just the data storehouse. For example, in our case, it could be when the game was played, who won the game, etc. 2-3 items like that. And then this is put in an array, which gives you the entire set. And this sits inside what is called the adapter. So if you see, there is a class here called recycler view adapter, right? So it is this adapter's job. We have been talking about model view controller, right? So this is our view. This becomes our model, this adapter. The adapter knows what is in which cell and how to, what information is there and how many cells are there, how much information is there. All of those things are known to the adapter. And the controller itself, it asks the adapter, hey, how many cells? Adapter says 25. Okay, so it tells the view that there will be 25 total cells for it to know how much to scroll. And then the view will ask the controller what is in the first cell. So the controller then asks the adapter, which is the model, hey, what is in the first cell? And that's how this whole communication happens. These two talk to each other, these two talk to each other. View is not talking to the model. That does not happen. So this is how it works. So for example, if you look at this class, which is basically the controller in our case, it has all the methods that are needed to communicate with the adapter, like how many columns are there, etc., right? And the adapter itself has information on how many values are there, what type they are. Our type is custom. We declared a type called past game. It is an inner class of this class. So all of this comes together. You see how this is working? So when the app runs, the view is shown. View asks the controller how many cells, what is in the first cell, and it gets that information, and that's how this communication flows. And whenever we want to add a new cell, we have to update this list and propagate that. So the view needs to know that the list has got updated, so it needs to revalidate itself. Otherwise, you can add it to the list, but the view doesn't know, it will keep showing the old information. Like when a new email comes, you want to see it in the list, right, in your email program. So that list needs to know that something new has happened. So that's what all this is. So we did this step, I just talked about it. This also, that past game data. Okay, so we also did a little bit of the design work we saw in our, this one here is where we said what is going to be displayed in each item. So this here tells us, right? This is the part which we are going to polish going forward, either today or in the next class. So this part also we did. If you remember, we have, if you run your app, you will see that it creates that floating action button, which we changed to a play button. And when you play, it launches the new screen. So this is where we were at. We had some dummy data, and the play would show us the game state, right? And this is where we stopped last time. And that's where we'll continue today. Okay, before we start, I just want to, I like to give out these quotes. And one of these is from this man called Sir William Osler. He was a doctor, he was a physician in the 19th century. He said that the very first step towards success in any occupation is to become interested in it. If you cultivate interest in something, you will start doing it. You will enjoy it. You will do more of it. And slowly and gradually, you will become an expert. So that is one of our jobs as teachers, is to cultivate that interest in you. So you start learning, you show, if you have interest, you will go beyond the requirements of the course to achieve good marks. You will actually become more skilled in it. And this fellow, William Osler, actually, I have his Wikipedia page open here. I opened it on purpose. He's frequently been described as father of modern medicine. And he was born in Bond Head. Anybody know where Bond Head is? Bond Head. How many of you have driven on the 400? So as you are going south, as you're going south, even coming north, as you're going south, you will see an exit for Bond Head. Bond Head is on Highway 27, just west of 400. So that's where he was born. And if you go on drive on Highway 27, you will see there is a plaque which says birthplace of Sir William Osler. So he was a local guy. But anyway, he didn't live much here. He ended up moving all over the place. He was a fellow of the Royal Society of Surgeons in Royal College of Surgeons in the UK, and then he founded the Johns Hopkins Hospital, which is very famous. It's an American hospital. So that's what he said, and that's what we'll try to do. We'll try to develop interest and work from there. So today our job is to do this last part, to design the model and the view for the game itself. What we will start with is the view. Let me see what my next slide is. Okay. Just an aside. I posted some reading assignments, some links. Did anybody read those? You did? Oh, what were the topics? Remind me.
Fragment, recycler view, and
weighting of yes. So that will come in handy. We'll use the weights to design this. And fragment recycler view, just so that you get some more background information. So good. So to do the game model, we'll think through the game logic. We'll describe steps. What happens when we do this? What should happen? What should not happen, etc. Game view will design a grid, just like we did with the calculator. We'll design a grid now. We have this is our game board in an activity, and we need to implement interactivity. So we'll do that, and then we'll come to the rest. Okay, I want to go forward and do this first. To add a grid, so we'll add buttons. That's the most logical data view type. So that's how the app will interact with the user. Okay, so in your app, open the game board that we added last time. Actually, I would like to delete both of these and restart so we get another attempt at it. Okay, so we'll just delete this, we'll make it blank. and go to the text and check it's blank. Okay, so what we want is, you can also do that if you want to do it again. Let's just get another iteration, some practice. So we'll put a text view here, and what we did was we made it as wide as the screen is. So this is how you do it. See, this is how it appears. These circles, 4 of them, they allow you to constrain each side to either an edge or another element, whatever the case may be. So right now we just want to deal with it, horizontal positioning, how it will look. So we'll drag from this circle, the left circle, to the edge, and then do the same from the right circle. And it puts these spring representation of the constraints. And what it is doing is, if you open these attributes, it will tell you what is happening, right? So this is constraint widget is telling us that these 2 constraints are there. These are not there, that's why a plus appears. So you have that information. Now you have options, things like you can determine where it is going to be percentage wise. We want it in the center, so we'll leave it at 50. And what we want is, we want it to take the entire width. Now the width of this element is determined by this attribute called layout width. Right now it says wrapped content. What that means is, however wide your text is inside it, it will be just that wide. So let's say if I go here text, and if I change this text to text view text, that thing should become wider, right? But that is not ideal. We want it to take up all the space always. So what you do is, you just say width to match constraint, and as soon as you say that, what it means is take up the entire width. And your constraints have options. You can have, from the edge, you can say, okay, never go all the way to the edge, leave 8 points space. So it will just make it slightly smaller. So these are called the margins. Okay, so that part is done. Next, what we want is the image view. And how we did that was, we brought an image view element from the palette there and dropped it here. And when you drop an image view, it will ask you what image. And it gives you a bunch of options, the inbuilt ones. So there are some which are in the project that either you have added or it created for you when you created the project. And there are some default ones that come with the system or with the theme that you are using. So this was our image. We'll say okay. We'll come here. Now we want to do the same thing. We will attach it to the edges. And in this case, we can do it to the 3 edges. Okay. So that way, this is always going to be attached to the bottom and be centered. Now, what if we want it to take up the entire space? We can do the same thing as we did for the other thing. We can say match constraint. But you see what happened? It made the image view, the container bigger, but the image is the same size, right? So how do we change that? What are we looking for? We want it to be square. So this has become a rectangle now. It is longer than it is taller. We want it to have the same height as the width, or we want it to have the same aspect ratio. We want it to maintain its aspect ratio. And you can easily determine, if you do a Google search for how to maintain the aspect ratio of an element, you will find that you need to look for a property called adjust view bounds. And we will enable it to true. we'll set it to true and you'll see what happens. Suddenly the image is just as big as, it's basically become a square. Okay. So now what we want is, we want this and this also, we want to basically position them so that they are relative to each other, in the same, regardless of the device size, we will be able to control that. Okay, let this text view be right in the center here, vertically in the space available here. So how did we do that in the calculator when we wanted to do something like that? What was it that we did? Gravity is also needed. See, right now this text view, the text is on the left, so we can change its chain. We did chaining, but let's just set the gravity here to center. Okay. So this text became, now what we did was chaining. So what we want is take this and shift and click on the next one, and say, when you do right click after that, it will say, give you an option to create a chain. You can create a horizontal chain or a vertical chain. Let's say we want to create a vertical chain. Right. So what it did is, chain by default, although we forced it to attach to the bottom, it created equal spaces everywhere. So we can play around with that. We can look at the constraint widget and play with this. Layout, height, layout. So basically, let's take a look here for a moment. The text view, this part, this one here, these are the things we did, right? We changed the height, width, not the height, the width of the constraint to match the view to match constraint that assigns is 0 dp. And we set the margins to 8 pixels and gravity to center, and this was the text. These are the ones that it added when we did the chaining. So it has a horizontal bias of 0.5, and it is the bottom of this text view is linked to the top of the image view. That's what it has done. These are the constraints it has added for us. What is linked to what? When we did the chaining, so the text view is there, and then the image view. So these constraints are what is telling them what to do. And this is what you will see in a moment. We will need to be familiar with this a bit when we add those buttons, because the default behavior of this chaining is not in our favor. So let's change this bias to 0.8 and see what happens. Okay, preview. Oh no, this is horizontal bias. Okay, for now, we'll come back to this. What I want to do is get started with the buttons, so we can move on with our tic-tac-toe, and then we will see if we like this or we want this to be at the bottom. Bringing it at the bottom is not going to be that difficult. Okay, how do we add the buttons in a grid? what we did for the calculator was we dropped a button and brought it here, right? So in the same way, let's bring 3 buttons and then we'll resize them, etc., to cover the grid. Now these buttons, right now if you see, there is a warning. This view is not constrained, it has only design time positions. So it will jump to 0, 0. So if you were to run this app right now, all the 3 buttons will go and stick to the origin, which is the top left corner. Okay, now then what happens? Let's say we want to create a chain. Let's add all the 9 buttons first. Okay, let's do that first, and then we'll create horizontal and vertical chains in one go. So you'll notice that I'm not copying and pasting the buttons. I'm just dragging and dropping each one. That if you copy and paste the buttons, what happens is it messes up the order here, and then you have to reorder them. The order is important because this order determines what stays on top. So if image view is before these buttons, the buttons are overlaid on top of the image. If the buttons are before the image, then the image will be on top. So that's why just drag and drop and it maintains the order. Alright, so we've got 9 buttons. Now what you want is to select the top 3 buttons, and be very careful. This is a step that can lead to a lot of time wasted. If the wrong button is selected, we'll chain the wrong button and suddenly it will look very weird once it is laid out. So top 3 buttons are selected. Right click and click on chains and say create horizontal chain. See what happened? Where are the buttons? They disappeared, right? What happened to them? Where are they? They're there somewhere. They've gone off the screen. So let's examine now what happened in the, see they're here. In the preview, you see that they're off the screen. The dotted lines. So why have they gone off the screen? For that, we need to examine the constraints. So these are our buttons. We are talking about button 1, it should say, but button 2 and button 3. I'm just going to change its ID to button 1. So it is, oops. So we'll call it button 1. So our terminology becomes update all usages, say yes. So it is going to update everywhere, including the constraints. So this becomes button 1. So we are talking about button 1, button 2 and button 3. So in the XML, look for IDs, button 1, button 2 and button 3, right? What has it done? Button 1 is the one that is here. It is saying constrain end to the start of. So a view, if this is your view, this is top, this is bottom, this is start, and this is end. So what is this constraint doing? It is saying constrain end to start of button 2. So basically, let's pretend that these were the 3 buttons. It is saying end of this button is attached to the start of the next button, which is okay, right? Horizontal bias 0.5, equal spacing. Constrain start of, we are still talking about the button 1, first button. It is saying constrain start to end of what? End of image view. So it is saying that this is the button 1. Start of this is constrained to the end of the image view, which is wrong. We want it to be constrained to the start of the image view. So what happens is in chaining, it is not doing overlaying. It is assuming that you want that image view to have its space and then the chain to start. We don't want that. That is the default behavior when you say create chain. So this is why you will have to change this to start. Okay. Okay, good. That is done. One button, but it is still, you will see, it is all over the place because we may have such problems in the other buttons as well. Was that clear what I just did?
What did you do after selecting all the buttons? Create a vertical chain?
Horizontal chain. Not all. See, just the 3 in a row. 3 in a row.
First three?
First 3 in a row, right click, create horizontal chain, and then you will get these. I haven't done anything with the other 6 buttons yet. Okay, so button 2. Button 2 should be okay because it's in the middle of 2 buttons. So it is saying constrain end to start of button 3. That is okay. And constraint start to end of button 1. That is also okay. What about button 3? Button 3 is also saying constrain end to start of image view. What should it become? End. Exactly. Constrain end to end of image view. And you will see as soon as you do that, your 3 buttons will fall into their place. Okay. All right. Go ahead and do the same for the next 2 rows and fix those problems.
Can you scroll up a little bit?
Yeah. So let's do it again. I'll explain it on the board what has happened. This is what we want to do, right? We want the buttons to be chained like this. We're just doing horizontal, later we'll do the vertical. We want these buttons to be in a chain and this button starting here attached to this end of this image view and this button, the end of it attached to the end of the image view. And what happened was that when we built the chain, Android Studio assumed that this image is going to be the first element and then the rest will follow. And in fact, it did not just do that. It basically made a mess of it. So what it did was it took this end and said this is connected to this edge. So everything shifted. And even this button, it was saying that this end is connected to start. It was basically all over the place. So we have to fix that. So the way to do it is I don't know if there is in the interface there is something, but in the XML it's very easy to spot and easy to fix. So let me just go over the entire thing again. Go here I'm going to undo until I have removed the chains. Okay. No, it is still there. Okay. So this was before the chaining, right? And this ID I had changed to button 1. I'm going to do that again. Okay, so we've got these 3 buttons, 1, 2, 3. So we'll select here. Make sure in this list here, make sure those are the only three things that are selected. If you have a 4th one by mistake, it will go and jump in that chain. It will get aligned with those. So these 3, and then you right click and you say create horizontal chain. And as soon as we do that, the whole thing goes off the screen, because what it has done is it has attached, like I said, it has attached this part, this edge to this. So the whole thing has shifted. Now it is our job to bring it back. So to do that, we have to examine all these constraints. It has added 2 constraints for each of these. So we'll examine those and see if they're right. So now you go to the text and look for button 1. And these are actually these 3 are what it has added. This is layout editor. This is just, the positioning, the y-axis, the vertical. But what we are interested in is these 2, constraint end to start off. What it is saying is that end of this button is constrained to the start of the next. See, button 1 is connected to button 2. So this is we are on button 1. Button 1 end is constrained to the start of button 2, which is correct. We want it like this. We want this to be like this. Look at the next one. It is saying that the start of this button, the button 1, is connected to the end of the image view, which is our problem. So the start of this button is connected to the end, meaning the whole thing has to be here. So you change that. You change that to start. Change the word end to start. Now the thing has moved, but it is still not right, because maybe there is some other constraint which is wrong. So once you've done button 1, you look at button 2. Button 2 says end of the button 2 is connected to start of button 3. So this end is connected to the start of the next button, which is right. And start of this button, button 2, is connected to the end of button 1, which is also correct. This is connected to this. So this we don't have to do anything. But what about the next, button 3? Button 3, it says end of button 3 is connected to start of image view. So this is connected to this. Now how that is possible? It's impossible, really. You cannot, originally what it did was this is connected to this, and this is connected to that. So how can you lay the views like this? Why it was just, unless your view is spherical, you can't do that. So this is why we need to change this. We need to say end to end of image view. Oh, sorry. What happened? Oh, I have a spelling mistake, right? Yeah. Good. So this is what happened now. Okay. Now I want you to do the other 2 rows. That's your practice. How's it going? How many of you are done? Are you guys also done?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's start then. So, if you are done, I should also do it so we can move along. I'm going to do it here. I'll just create the horizontal chains and then change the XML. So button 3, 4, and to start off. 5, I don't have to do anything. 6, I have to say constraint end to end off. So button 7, start is okay. This needs to be done. And 8 is okay. 9, I have to say end to end off. Okay, good. So this is what it looks like. Now, what do you think will happen if we take these 3? So now we're taking button 1, 4, and 7, and make sure that you don't have anything else selected by mistake, by chance. And then we say right click and chains and create vertical chain. What happened? Same problem, different direction. Alright, I'll let you guys try to fix it first before I do it. You done it? Good. So you've done all 9 buttons, vertical and horizontal. Perfect. You've also done vertical as well? Oh, good. You guys are ahead. Good. So who is not done the vertical? Do you want to attempt? Okay, you guys can attempt it.
Actually, I have a question. So, what's the difference between using the chain and the what's it called horizontal layout?
Horizontal layout.
Yeah.
Yes, very good question. Let's see, when everybody is finished with what they're doing, I'll explain. So who's still working on it? The vertical chaining? Everybody's done? Okay. So as you already discovered, the problem was that it was attaching top to bottom of image view for the first button. We want it to say top to top. And then button 1, 4 and 7 were in the same chain. So 4 is the middle button. We should not have to do anything to it. And the 7 is saying attach bottom to top of image view. Instead, we want it to say bottom to bottom of image view. So that is, the first chain is done. The second one is 2, 5 and 8. Same kind of changes, top to top of image view. 5, we don't have to do anything, and 8, we will do the same, where it says bottom to top of image view. So the lowest button should be constrained to the bottom of the image view. So there it is, and the same thing with number 9, bottom to bottom, and button number 3 is our first button in that row. We'll do top to top of image view. Okay. So this is what you will end up with. So Harry just asked a question, what is the difference between using chains and using, let's say, a horizontal layout? So we could put 3 buttons in a horizontal layout, 3 of those, and put that in a vertical layout. Perfectly reasonable way of doing it in terms of, how it appears, and you will achieve the same result. But constraint layout has an advantage. What happens is that because of these constraints, Android, when it is rendering your view, it is able to do all the placement calculations in one shot and render it. When you've got mix of layouts, it has to do an internal layout first, then compute its width, then do the parent layout, and then iterate. Oh, is the parent bigger than that? Okay, then I have to go in and compute again. It takes longer, it's inefficient. So that's why they designed the constraint view, where in one shot, it's like a set of equations, you solve them, you're done. It's a non-iterative procedure. Otherwise, it becomes iterative. You solve it, then you solve the parent, and then it affects the child, and you do that, until everything is solved. So this is non-iterative, so that's why this was invented by Google not too long ago. I think 2015 or 16 is when it came about. So that's why we are using it. And this is the preferred way of using it. Not everywhere we may use it. We may, for example, when we are doing this part, I want us to use the vertical and the horizontal layouts. We did last time. Also to learn, right? Because you may come across it. You need to know what it is like. Sometimes it's okay. There it is reasonable to use it there. So that was it. Now let's see how we can make these buttons take up the space. Okay, I'm going to go back to this view and select the first 3 buttons. Do you remember what we did last time with the calculator to make the buttons take up the whole space available? Match constraint, if it was one individual button. Now we're talking about the chain. So let's say we select those 3 and we right click. And there are some options here, right? There is one called organize, and this is what has the options. Pack horizontally. So if I say pack horizontally, see what happens. Well, nothing happened because they're chained. They're already in that. If I say expand horizontally, it takes up all the space. That's what you want. You want to select 3 at a time, first horizontally and then vertically, or in any order really. But that's what we can do here. We can select them 3 at a time and say organize and expand. Horizontally for horizontal chains and then vertically for vertical chains. Do you guys see the same thing as I'm seeing? Only the middle one is all the way. Why is that? What is the difference between these two, that this guy is not as tall as this? I think we will have to do the adjustment that Sandeep pointed out. We'll select all of these buttons and see all 9 buttons are selected right now. We'll change all the widths to say match constraint and all the heights to say match constraint. And you should get a perfect grid. Yes, sir. So now run your app and see what you get in your emulator or the phone. So you're getting the buttons, they're coming up. They're almost perfectly positioned in the grid. It's just that the image I gave you guys is not very perfect. It's not exactly at a third of the distance. I made it just by eyeballing it. So that's why it seems slightly off, but it is okay. Once we are done with the overall design, you will see that that would not matter. Okay, so with all the 9 buttons still selected, let's customize what it is going to look like. So let's change the text to either 0 or O or X. Oops. So if I say just X, it gives me an option, and if I press enter, it selects one of these strings. So make sure you press escape. So let's say if I just type X, it starts expanding, right? And if I press enter at this point saying I want X, it has selected the first one. And that's what is showing. This video isn't valid for streaming to this device. So what you want to do is press escape to hide those suggestions and then press X. Okay, so X is there. Now what we want is we want to increase its font size. So as before, we will go to the right place. In the attributes, you will see text size. Let's go with the largest, see what happens. Not good enough. I don't think it is. Let's try 56. Even larger, if you wanted, you could go slightly larger. Okay, this is how I'm going to leave it. And you can choose its color the way you want it to appear. Whatever customizations you want to do, you do. I want to change the background of these buttons to transparent. So the grid is always visible. Even if the button is covering the edge of one of the lines, it would not matter. So how do we set the background to transparent? Good. Opacity 0. So basically you come here to the background and you can select, this is what the opacity is. If you set this to 0, regardless of what the color is, doesn't matter. That's what we want, right? So that's what happened. As soon as I set the opacities to 0, we've got a perfectly transparent button on each square of the grid. Now when you run your app, you should see, instead of the gray background of the buttons like this, you will see completely transparent buttons with an X.
Just change the match. So the place is when all the lot of people see space between the lines, the lot, the values. So that's why if you make it transparent, it's going to, and that's switching the opacity to what you operate in the back. So that means you actually make the operation. So that's
You can replace the grid with a more perfect grid if you want. Just for demonstration, it is good enough. Okay, everybody up to this point? So now our job is to start looking for interactivity. What will happen when any of these buttons is touched? So before we start that, I think it's a good time to take a break. And then this is a logical point. We're done with the view design. Now we're talking about the controller and the interactivity. So we'll take a 20-minute break. It's 1:10 right now. We'll resume at 1:30. All right?